Welcome to Munro Live. My name is Nate Wallace, lead engineer at Munro Associates. Munro is an engineering firm that specializes in benchmarking, bottoms-up costing, and new product development. Today, we're reviewing the 2025 Volkswagen ID Buzz, which is the latest iteration of the 1950s icon microbus. So right off the bat, we can see that they've managed to maintain this retro styling with sort of updated looks for today's vehicles. They've managed to capture that small front overhang from the front wheels to the front bumper that is iconic with that vehicle. When I first saw this vehicle, my first question mark was, I wonder what's under the hood. I wonder what's in front. Because typically, one of the biggest engineering challenges with a van these days is impact testing, right? So there's a bevy of tests that automakers have to compete with, right? They have to design a vehicle that is capable of surviving these impact tests. And not only the vehicle surviving it, but the occupants as well. Now, battery electric vehicles have really given us the ability to bring these types of vehicles back because they typically just fare better in crash tests. So again, when I first saw this, my first thought was, I wonder what's under the hood. So I walked up to the vehicle and I popped the latch, and instantly I saw essentially what Munro has been preaching to auto manufacturers for years. And that is, if you open the hood, the only thing the owner of the vehicle should be able to see are fluid fills. So we have a fluid fill here. We have ports for your AC system here, and we have a reservoir for your coolant tucked up further. Otherwise, any sort of service that has to happen with this vehicle essentially needs to happen at the dealership. Another interesting use of materials that I saw under here is the use of EPP foam, or expanded polypropylene. Typically, this is used as an impact absorption material, so it's in place, being at this part of the vehicle. However, they've also used it as an air duct. Again, it's an interesting use for this material. It's not typically the way it's used, but it does fulfill its role. It's a lightweight material, and it's relatively cheap to manufacture it. So I was impressed by that. It's an idea that we'll be carrying forward for sure. As we continue to walk around the vehicle, one of the reasons that most auto manufacturers have gone away from a two-tone paint scheme is the difficulty in keeping a consistent paint line down the vehicle. I think that Volkswagen has done a pretty decent job with their paint line. From any further than 5 feet away, there's almost no visible mismatch in the paint line. However, you will notice that if you get close enough, you can see the mismatch between the door line here and where they've actually used two separate panels here. So this is a plastic panel, this is a sheet metal fender. So you can actually see the delta there. However, they've done a very good job of maintaining that paint line between the doors. And then again, back here where they have a separate plastic panel that forms that new paint color. So all in all, I think they did a really good job blending that line, especially when they're using a mix match of materials. So here we have sheet metal and plastic. Here, this is one straight panel where they've actually had to mask the door in order to get the two separate paint lines. And then again, at the front, they have a plastic panel and a sheet metal panel that come together to make that edge. I think the color choices on the materials in the vehicle could be off-putting to some. I personally think they're a nice choice, sort of a creamsicle look, if you will, an orange creamsicle look. But when I get in the vehicle, I think the seats are very comfortable. They have a lot of adjustment. I will say that even though that the seats have quite a bit of adjustment, both fore, aft, seat back, there's lumbar. You can adjust the lumbar as you see fit. There's also a way to extend the seat if you're a person who has longer legs. I'm not, so I keep that in. Otherwise, most of the surfaces that you come in contact with on this vehicle are relatively pleasant. The steering wheel's fine. Nice material choices there. Sort of piano black here that is bound to show fingerprints, but that's sort of the standard in most vehicles today. It's piano black. If I were to close the door or come in contact with it, the whole panel is a hard plastic, except for where you might interact with it with your arm. So again, it's a sort of a very moderated approach to soft touch materials in this vehicle. When I get in the vehicle, I'm greeted by the infotainment system, as with most modern day vehicles. The layout on this is pretty clean. I have a display mounted to the stock of my steering wheel, which is actually really nice because as I adjust my steering wheel, I don't lose any visibility of the screen itself. That is a pretty common complaint that I have about vehicles is I like my steering wheel relatively low. So when the steering wheel is in a position that is comfortable for me, I typically lose about the top 10% of that screen. So this is a nice welcomed feature. There's a quick menu to get to navigation, phone, media, and your Android or Apple CarPlay. Otherwise, it's about what I'd expect in a modern day vehicle in terms of infotainment screen. It's quick, it's responsive. There are a lot of apps and icons that you may need to go through. It does provide some tips and help. You can adjust your driving mode, ambient lights, as this vehicle has a lot of different ambient lights. Though looking at it right now, it looks like this one's white and that one's red, and I don't know if that's supposed to be that way or if it's because the door is open. If I open this door, it turns red. That's an interesting thing. The ambient lighting on the doors changes based on the door's position. So if it's open, it gives you an indicator that maybe it's open. We have this center console here that has a nice storage tray in the top where you might put your wallet. It does have something that resembles a cup holder here, though I wouldn't trust it. I think the primary cup holders are in this drop-down compartment here. They look like perfectly serviceable cup holders. There are movable panels that you can sort of subdivide this as you wish. Otherwise, I think this is a really interesting design choice for this vehicle. The only real storage in terms of area where you can put things away is this little front cubby here. And then there is also another sliding tray back here that is pretty small. There's not a lot going on with it. And most of that comes down to the choice to make this removable so you can take this out. That has to be for the ability to open up the floor plan of the vehicle, because in my opinion, there's no reason why I would take this out and use it as a cooler or any sort of storage external to the vehicle. So it must be for opening up the floor plan of the vehicle. These rear seats are very large. I haven't physically put a rear facing car seat in here, but I can tell just by looking at it that those are going to fit easily and not impact the front occupants of the vehicle. If your kids are a little bit older, the forward facing car seats are actually going to be able to, you're going to be able to keep those in the vehicle if you want passengers to go to the rear seat, because these have a fold and tumble, or a fold and slide. I guess it's a tumble and slide for this seat to allow the rear passengers to enter the third row seating. In order to put these back forward, we have to pull the lever, push them back by hand. There is a nice indicator on this lever that lets you know if the seats are locked or not. If that is not engaged, you can see that there is a little red tab that ends up appearing in the window. So one unique feature that's pretty noticeable right away from the outside is this very small window for the rear seats. And the other interesting thing is that slides. So the glass, instead of going down into the door, actually slides back behind the other window. So it's nice that you have the ability to open that. It's nice that you can have that open window back here, but it does actually give you 2 layers of glass that you have to look through if the window is open and you're looking sideways. Most manufacturers of 3-row SUVs give at least the second row occupants the ability to control their climate change. Most manufacturers put that capability into the center console between the front row of seats. Because the center console is removable on this vehicle, Volkswagen had to find an alternative location. Typically, they put those controls in the center line of the roof, which allows for either occupant or all 3 occupants of the second row seat to adjust their climate from one spot. However, Volkswagen has chosen to put smaller controls in the headliner to the side, which is frankly an easier place to control if I'm sitting in the back seat than having to reach forward to get them. However, it does mean that Volkswagen made the choice to spend the money to have 2 separate controllers, one for each side. Another feature that Volkswagen points out with this vehicle is the ability for the seats to essentially create a flat load floor. So if you fold the second row seats down and we come to the back, has a power lift gate. They include this shelf in the rear that allows you to create essentially a flat load floor from the back of the vehicle to the front of the vehicle without having to remove all of the seats. So this shelf has the ability to flip up. It is also relatively easily removable. There are 2 screws here that you take out, and that whole assembly is removed from the vehicle. They give you these nice bins that look like they fold down flat to give you the room back. They also include some sort of interesting brackets with Velcro on them that allow you to create little barriers to prevent items from sliding around the rear. I don't know how effective they might be, but it's a neat trick that doesn't cost Volkswagen very much to include. So those are sort of the passenger interface key features of the vehicle. Moving beyond that to the specifications of the platform itself, this vehicle comes in either rear-wheel drive or all-wheel drive. The all-wheel drive has a maximum range of about 231 miles. The rear-wheel drive is limited to 234. It has a 90 kilowatt hour battery pack. The version that we're looking at today is the Pro S Plus, which is a mid-tier trim level with destination charge and all other fees, any other packages that may have been equipped. This one's at 66. These start at about 61.5 and can be spec'd out up to 71.5. That would be a fair price for a vehicle that had a bit more range to it. I am a person, I personally own an EV, and I think anything under 300 starts to limit your ability to use that vehicle as a sole vehicle for your family. If you're a family who's fortunate enough to have 2 vehicles, this one would work for you as your second vehicle, your run around town vehicle. I start to get a little nervous about taking longer family road trips with a vehicle like this, especially if you have smaller kids. It's going to add a lot of time to your trip because you're going to be making frequent stops at chargers. The things that I've read about this is that while it's limited to 150 kilowatt charging capacity, it seems like in cases it can actually charge a little bit faster than that. So I've read some reviews where people have put this on a 350 kilowatt charger and it was charging closer to 175 kilowatts. Obviously that changes as you make it through the battery curve and its charging capacity at those different points of the curve. So because it does have a smaller battery, even though it's limited to a slower charging capacity, you're not going to spend a lot of time at the charger. But it still equates to more frequent stops if you were to use this as a sole family vehicle and you're planning on taking road trips. Overall, I think this is a really great vehicle. I think the biggest downside of this vehicle is its range, and that's limited by Volkswagen's MEB platform. They just can't fit more battery in it. So if you're looking for an around-the-town family hauler, this is great for you. If you're looking for a road trip machine, which is what these were sort of originally built for in the 50s, I think you're going to have to look elsewhere. If you're interested in learning more about Munro or how we can help OEMs, please visit sales@leandesign.com.